Reach high, aim high, and obtain. I had a special request today from my dad, and he's been wanting my ribs. And typically I would have my 4 pounds of ribs, beef ribs specifically that I work with, or what I love to do is actually I prefer to use stew chopped up pieces of beef meat. And the reason why is because I found with the ribs, even though the bone from the ribs does add flavor, there's no denying that, and I want to state that, but I found that even though the meat eventually falls off of the bone before you even put it in a person's plate, I end up liking the fact I don't have to work so hard to get to the actual meat when I do the stew meat, pre-chopped beef cubes instead. So you can do any approach, but I just found it works best with what I like to do and how I like to eat of doing this. But in this particular instance, I'm doing both because these get me closer to my 4 pounds, and it's what I had on hand. What we'll do is like I said, just a little bit over 2 pounds, but I typically am supposed to use 4. But what I will do is I will take the extra sauce from this and I'll use it for another recipe, just because I'm doing the full amount of my ingredients but the reduced amount of meat. And it'll give us more sauce too that we can actually swirl our meat around with and really get the flavor. So that's always an extra plus because we love our sauces in this family. So what I have is the ingredients over here so you can kind of see what I'm working with. One is I've got a 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar, a 3/4 of a cup of regular granulated sugar. I've got my beer here, and I actually use the full amount of the beer here, and that's part of why I end up getting more sauces. I use the full amount of a beer bottle, and you can see that this is actually my dad's favorite beer, which is why I use it for this recipe. It's this Belgian white Blue Moon beer. That's his ultimate favorite, so I have to use that when I make these ribs. I've also got Kentucky Bourbon over here, and I make sure I get it in the glass bottle simply because I don't want to have to worry about leaching of plastics into the alcohol, which could mess with the flavor. So I do want to caveat that. And of course, bourbon comes from Kentucky, so of course it's Kentucky Bourbon. Then we've got our apple cider vinegar, which is right here. And even though it does say a Trader Joe's jar, this is actually our homemade vinegar. We just repurposed it, the bottle, with our homemade vinegar. But the main thing is, if you're not making homemade vinegar, that's okay. You just want to make sure it's organic, it's raw, it's unfiltered, it's with the mother, it's without any pasteurization, to make sure it's as healthy as possible when you do this recipe. And this is actually, I forgot to mention, this is 3 tablespoons of the organic apple cider vinegar. And then of course with the Kentucky Bourbon, I'm going to mention that's going to be 1/4 cup of the Kentucky Bourbon. Then with ketchup, we actually make our own homemade ketchup, so that's why we have this jar here. And with the ketchup, you want to do 2 tablespoons of that. Since I didn't have fresh ginger, I actually used ground up ginger here. And I did 1/4 teaspoon on that because with fresh ginger, you would typically use about 1 to 2 inches of it, just based on how much flavor you want the ginger to have in your dish. I usually use about 2 inches when I do my ginger, but you just basically, you would peel it and grate it really finely. But this is a quick fix when one doesn't have fresh ginger on hand. Then with the soy sauce here, I do 2 tablespoons. And then this is what packs the punch. We actually use this hot sauce until we run out. And even though you're only doing 2 teaspoons, and you may be like, oh my God, that's really, really hot. Don't worry about it, because the heat is subtle, but it enhances the flavor of the whole dish. And it's not gonna be like burning the mouth, oh my God, I need ice cream or some kind of cream to cut the mouth. It's just a really nice quality heat that's not overpowering, but it enhances all the flavors in the dish. We also use mustard. I'm eventually going to be using my own, but the main approach for me is to make sure that it's without any sugar. You can see there's no sugar in this particular mustard. And then if you want to, you can add some pepper. I don't tend to do that, but if you wanted to, you could do about half a teaspoon of black pepper if you like pepper. And then the last ingredient here is arrowroot, and this is 3 tablespoons of arrowroot. Now the reason I'm doing this is because this actually thickens the sauce that I put together, and I've actually got in here, I've got my bourbon, my 1/4 cup of bourbon, my 3 tablespoons apple cider vinegar, my 2 tablespoons ketchup, my 1/4 teaspoon of the ginger powder, although again, 2 inches of the ginger ground up. Then 2 tablespoons soy sauce, 2 teaspoons of the hot sauce, 1 teaspoon of the mustard, and then, like I said, if you wanted to, you could add the pepper. And the reason I've got this is because where I am in the state, I have to put all these ingredients together at the same time. So I found it's best to already have it kind of mixed up together in a little pouring container, which I chose my Pyrex measuring 1 cup here, to make it easier. Because everything, once you get to a certain state, it's all about timing. So you got to get this just right. So what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the stove now and actually do this. And you'll see, once I get to a certain point, it's all about timing. Purposely moving all of this over here. And then, of course, open your beer. Gotta open up the beer here. There we go. Because I gotta have that ready to go. Okay, so let's do this together. And then 2 other things I want to mention is you need a spoon to stir everything with, tongs so that you can flip your ribs if you're doing the rib meat. Otherwise, you could do just the spoon and move things around so that you can flip it really good. And then you need to have a container that can go into the oven with a lid. So you can see I have my lid here in the back that I can put on top of this. I've got it on my really hot eye. I've already got my oven preheated to 350 degrees because once we get it to a certain state, we're actually going to put this in the oven with the lid on for a certain amount of cooking time so we can get started. So we're going to start with our 3/4 cup of the white sugar, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to stir this. And you may be like, that's weird, you're starting with sugar, but what's going to happen is it's going to start changing colors and become liquefied. So what we'll do is we'll keep stirring this, and that's why you want the heat up, is so that this will melt quicker. But when you space it out like this, you'll see it starts melting. But the main important thing is you want to keep the sugar moving. And that's because if you don't keep it moving, even though it may be melting, it could create burn spots in the sugar, which will create a burnt flavor potentially in the meat, and you're looking to avoid that. You just want it to have a nice caramel color, where it's just a little bit brown. And then we'll go to our next step. This will take just a little bit of time, but it'll be worth it. And this is our cast iron container. It's got the high ridge to it so that I can really stir things around and I can flip things without having to worry about any over splatter when I do things like this. And it'll take a bit for this particular skillet to heat up, but as with any cast iron, once it's hot, you're good to go.
And even though we're saying this is a white sugar,
It's
it is a
organic.
raw sugar, and it's organic, so it has a little bit of a
It's more quality
color
yeah.
to it.
It's not white because it actually has more positive stuff in it than regular white sugar does. I absolutely abstain from white, bright sugar. So you can see it's starting to get a few clumps showing. it's subtle, but see here, like on the side, see where it's getting a little liquidy? That's why you want to keep that sugar moving. And you can see it's kind of starting to crystallize together, and that's what you're looking for, because that means it's starting to melt, which is really good, because that's what we want. We're looking for that nice quality color and liquefying, because this will actually be what helps coat all the meat, is the liquid that we're turning all the sugar into. And what's in a good rib? Sugar. But the great part is it does literally melt. If you use trimmed meat, it will melt off the bone. If you use other meat like I do, which is the stew type cubed meat, it melts in the mouth practically, which is really good. So you can see it's all starting to kind of come together there and liquefy, which is really good. That's what we're looking to have happen. You can see it kind of looks like little tiny candies, but this is why you got to keep it moving, is to prevent any potential burnt areas, because you need it to liquefy before you do next steps. See, we're getting almost there because we need it all liquefied, but you got to keep it moving. That's the important part. You can see it has changed colors, a good amount of it, but you still got to keep it moving. And right now we push it towards the center, because obviously the center is always the hottest spot on an eye. You can see that we're starting to get our color there. Now we're just looking for it mainly to melt, is what we're looking for, because you can see we still have a few sugar pieces in there. And you may want to, depending on what your eye is or isn't doing with your sugar, you may want to turn it down, because you're wanting to avoid it being burnt, but you're wanting to make sure everything melts. So feel free to turn down your eye if you need to. And then once it melts, we'll go to next steps. Okay, I see one piece of sugar there left. And then we'll be good to turn off the eye. Got to keep that sugar moving though. Okay, so we're going to turn it off. We're going to add our brown sugar. We're going to stir that in now. What will happen is the heat of the changed and liquefied organic regular sugar will actually help melt the brown sugar here. And we just want to bring that all together, stir it well. And get that well incorporated together. And you can see you can't really tell you put the brown sugar in because the other part was almost brown itself. Of course, my eye is officially off now. Now this is where I really love this part. This is like my favorite part of doing this, okay? Is once you've got everything well incorporated here together, you add the beer. Now watch, it'll see. love that part. And it becomes almost like a caramel sauce because of the way it kind of hardens the part that's out. But if I were to stick my spoon inside, it would actually start sticking to the spoon and be very caramel-like in color. So we'll just give it a moment there to cool down. Okay. And we just want to let it stop doing its thing just a little bit with the swelling there, because we just want it to drop the temperature down just a little bit for us. Okay, now we're looking good. Just looking for that to come down just a little bit more. I love doing that. That's like my favorite part of all, other than the final product, of course. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the sauce here that I prepared with the bourbon. And we're going to get that all in there. And this is where we're actually finalizing the sauce and making everything come together. Okay, so now we've got that added. So now what we're going to do, we're actually going to turn the eye back on. Okay, and then what will happen is it'll start heating up, and what we're looking to have happen now is for it to start actually boiling. The other thing I'm going to be doing is adding my arrowroot, but I'm going to do just a little bit at a time with this prep bowl, because I don't want to put too much in at the same time, simply because arrowroot can thicken so quickly. It's kind of best because everything's still kind of underneath and hard with the sugar. You need to give the sugar kind of time to melt back into what it was, which is kind of liquidy. But what'll happen is as it starts boiling, the crusting that occurred on the bottom with the sugar will actually start to come up and melt. So it actually makes your sauce that you need now. So it'll coat the ribs really, really good, or your chosen preferred meat, and it'll just coat it very beautifully. So we're looking to bring this all to boil. And you can hear I'm kind of scraping over that sugar that's hardened on the bottom, but that's okay. See here, if I do that, it kind of sticks because it's turned into like a caramel sauce. And that's what happens with this recipe, is it turns into like a caramel sauce. But what will also happen is the arrowroot is actually helping to also thicken it. Because even though it's all coming together, it's very much of a liquidy sauce until I add the arrowroot in. And I found when I add the arrowroot in it, it really brought the whole sauce together, and it really made a great covering for the meat. Kind of scrape the bottom there and make sure it's all melted off the bottom there just a little bit. And you'll feel it when you put your chosen tool on the bottom. When you just scrape along it, you can kind of feel where it's still at the bottom. So you just want to go through and kind of rake that off to make sure that everything's getting well incorporated. And you'll feel where it is and isn't still. Okay, and we're purposely bringing this to a nice boil. Okay, I still feel a few areas where it's still stuck down there a little bit. Let me grab that real quick. I don't want my pot sliding around on me. But I want to protect my hand too. Okay, I'm filling the bottom. I just got one spot there left. Oh, I think I just got it. Make sure we've got everything. Okay, so now we've kind of brought everything to our boil almost. So I'm going to add the rest of my arrowroot there. And this is so it'll start thickening. And let me, actually I forgot I needed to whisk that. Because of the way that the arrowroot is, you kind of need to whisk it together so you don't get clumps. Okay, so we will start adding our rib and beef meat here. Nope. Let it thankfully get there. Okay, so we're just going to gently start adding the meat, because it is quite hot because it is boiling. Okay, and then we throw the meat here. And another positive of when I do the other meat is I don't have to worry about the size of the bone preventing the meat from getting in there, which is really nice. Back so it doesn't read. So what we'll do is we're actually, you can see it's starting to come to a boil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tongs and I'm looking to rotate the meat. Now what you're going to do is you're going to rotate it just a few times on the top of the eye here, and then we're actually going to put it in the oven. And that's how come you wanted to make sure that you have your oven preheated, because you want to turn your meat over a few times. And the reason we've got the oven preheated is so that when we put the lid on this and put it in the oven, we're not dropping temperatures, which can affect the cooking time as well as your resulting product. And then I'm gonna stir the stew meat there, make sure everything's getting well coated and flipped as well. And you'll also see that as you're cooking, the rib meat will start to shrink as well as the other meat. And that's why you want to start out with just a little bit more meat, is because as it reduces in size, that means you're reduced in regards to your resulting product. So, okay. Well, I think we're at a good place now, because I've flipped everything, to put this now in the oven. And you want to make sure that it is boiling when you put it in the oven, so that way it's doing a nice coating of everything. Because once you put it in the oven, it's going to change how it cooks. So make sure you've got it at that boil before you're putting it in the oven. Okay, put our lid on, turn off our eye, get our mitts on. We're going to open this up. And we're gonna drop this in. And then we're gonna let this cook for about 1.5 to 2 hours. So I'm gonna set a timer for 2 hours. It'll drop to 159 immediately. But I'm gonna set a timer on my phone for every 30 minutes. Because every 30 minutes, I need to come to the oven, open it up, put the container on the top here, and flip the meat. So that as it's cooking and coating, I'm getting everything coated. Let's turn the meat in the container. Take the lid off. You can see how everything has thickened. So, and it's just gone so beautiful. So we're just moving the stew meat around, get it well coated. I'm gonna turn those. So stew meat, I've rotated that all, but now we need to do the ribs. So that's why I have my trusty tongs. So we'll turn those around a bit. This one. And you'll notice that the bone will start falling off too. So you'll want to grab it by the bone and just see how it's kind of doing. Okay, I want to get that one marinated a little bit more. There we go. Oh, see this one? Oops. This one is a piece of the bone. And you can kind of see it from the way that it is. So we'll rotate that one as well. Okay, let's put it back in. And I purposely am closing the stove because we want to keep the heat in for when we put it back in. Take our lid off. That is one of the consumers. Okay, and you can see how gelatinous the sauce has gotten. That's great. That's what we want because we wanted it to coat our ribs really good. See how it takes it just a little bit of time to move? That's great. Just doing a last minute coating here to make sure all the meat's been coated. And again, I knew I was gonna have extra sauce. That's okay, because we'll use it for other things. And I knew that from the get-go. And then let's take our...
But the sauce will be enough for up to 4 pounds, right?
Yes, ideally you would start with the 4 pounds. And then you can see how the meat here, I'm just taking the tongs and moving it, and look at how it's just separating so easily with that. See that?
That's awesome.
Got a little piece of fat stuck on here that it's not wanting to let go. Just trying to get these ribs one last coat. And you can see how thick it's got. See how it's just sticking on there? Now that's how come I put the arrowroot in. If you don't put the arrowroot in, it will be, see that? Just falls off. It will be extremely runny. It'll still be delicious, but that's how come I put the arrowroot in it, is so, see that? How it's got that really thick sauce that comes off the meat. And it also gives the consumers an opportunity to come in here and grab more sauce and lay it on top of the meat, so that it gives them even more flavor to kind of, dip their meat around in and flavor it up. It's wonderful. Okay, so let's get this plated and enjoy. I have this cute little sauce ladle that I'm just going to take some of the sauce and drizzle it on top here, and you can see how gelatinously thick it is. It's almost like a gravy, and this will give the consumer the opportunity to just, move their meat around in that sauce and get extra flavor. One way we love to eat our ribs is with summer casserole and a potato. I prefer the sweet potato, but it's whichever flavor floats your boat. Even potato salad would work great, as you know, like the standard rib. Coleslaw, corn, different items. It's whatever is your preference to go with ribs. So Dad fixed his plate. You can see how tender that is. Don't even really need a knife, I think. Just makes it easier though, especially if you've grabbed a rib piece that has the fat on it.
That's good. That's delicious, actually. That's good. Tell you what, anybody gets that, want to know they've got something good.